Welcome, Mr. Moritz von Oswald.
Thank you, Thorsten. It's a big pleasure to be here to answer a lot of questions and also to tell a bit about my work, our work with Basic Channel, Rhythm and Sound, Wackies, re-releases, whatever it concerns, on which side I try to, tell whatever I know. Thank you.
Well, speaking of the things that you know, we figured, apart from all the things that you just hinted that we will speak about, it is a really great opportunity to learn a little bit more about dub and the digital side of dub and what a dub is in the first place. And maybe we should start off with, Berlin is not essentially the center of dub culture in the world. Like, how did you get in touch with it?
I didn't get into dub in Berlin completely. I was listening to reggae for quite a long time when I was starting to work in a record shop, like really ages ago. And we got some imports from Great Britain where we checked out Channel 1 stuff and of course Lee Perry and like early 80s recordings that were hard to get, only on import, 12 inches, whatever. And it was, every time a record came in, it was something we sat down and discussed about and listened to it at that time, because they were so hard to get. So it was always a nice thing, an experience to listen to whatever we had. And then, beginning of the 90s, I started to to check it out again together with Mark. Mark Ernestus, my partner on Basic Channel, and he was also into reggae. He was even maybe a bit more diving into the hardcore, also 7-inch hard to get, 12 inches, whatever it was. And we discovered that we liked especially also one guy from New York who originally was from Jamaica, but that was Lloyd Barnes, Wackies, and he, we discovered that he was one of our favorite producers, and we tried to somehow link up with him and get into his whatever in his world, try to get to know him. We were going to New York anyway because of seeking in old cellars and basements for records, and at some point we met him in the South Bronx, and then another thing came up, which I actually have put on here on the player. There was a guy from London who also had connection with him, and he said it would be great if we could make a remix of a track that he wanted to release, and this track was called Mango Walk, produced by Wackies, which hadn't been released before. So we had the original tapes that we released, and we did a remix. And maybe for a start, we could give it a listen. Thanks. So we're listening to the original. So, this is the original. You hear lots of nice stuff in there. It's a lot of space as well. There's room for the vocals, especially for the bass, percussion, all the effects. But it's not too much. I think it's really quite a nice example of what was done at that time in New York. The New York sound, I think, is also quite important because, if you want to call it New York sound, because it was not the sound from Jamaica that he really had. He had some different attitude, and we really liked this kind of edge and the, let's say, sharp sound, but also very deep and very kind of edgy, the big bass, but it's sometimes even not recognizable as a bass. It's more like a pulse that you can hear on his recordings and his production. But I can also encourage you to have, if you have questions about this track, let me know. If there's anything you'd like to...
When you talk about at that time, could you specify that a little bit?
Early 80s, end of 70s, early 80s, all that, maybe 2 or 3 years when he had his studio in the South Bronx. Lots of people came in, many unknown artists. He was featuring a lot of people who had a one-shot record, or like a thing that, somebody wanted to try out something, and he turned it into a really nice record. People that, appeared maybe really on 1 or 2 7-inches, maybe 12-inch. That was it. Also, big names, like he was constantly working with Sugar Minott, he was constantly working with Leroy Sibbles from the Heptones, and there was a kind of a, basic production team, but around that, many people were shifting.
When you say, when you speak of a New York sound, do you think that the availability of technologies in New York was a different thing than in Jamaica?
I don't know. I might have to ask him.
What about the actual, because this is strictly underground. I mean, one of records and probably really obscure artists.
Yes.
So and the guy at his own studio, his own place, he pressed it up. He done that. So what kind of technology exactly would he have at his hands? I mean, probably some classic dub thingies like the Space Echo, I reckon, or some strings. But I mean, what kind of stuff he would work on to get the sound, like roughly. I'm not like speaking exact like models of of what equipment he had, but roughly what kind of setup he used, like the size of the mixer. I mean, was it like a really big console, or rather 8-track or 16-track, or could you specify? So probably.
I think it's something that he never told me. It's very hard to remember probably what went out and what came in. I think they constantly changed, and maybe had a I don't know, probably a small mixer. These things were made to use. I think there was a 24-hour go in his studio, where just people really had a session, then next session, next track, next recording, sleeping. And
it was done, but the track was done like in a sort of classic dub sense, that there was a band recording for him, and then he dubbed it out to the stereo tape with doing like live mixing. I mean what is like set up that because usually lots of producers don't really do that they sort of touch the faders too much while mixing down. So it was done in this classic dub way, or?
Of course. I mean, he's still doing this, I think, and I can recommend it. To do this style of mixing.
I know, because I've done it. I mean,
Sorry?
That's what I first actually got into production. Like I had this mixer and just toying around with it. So.
Yeah.
I
mean, the way I watched him, and I could get a sense of how he's doing. It's very intuitive. If there's something coming up, you cannot recall it, of course.
So he uses no automatization or anything.
I mean, at that time it was not
possible
anyway, yeah. But he's doing it now. I don't think so.
Probably that's a good chance to take us a little bit through the actual process of how you do make a dub, what a version is, all these kind of things. Because I mean, some of the keywords were there already, but it's probably a good thing to explain it a little bit, so that we got everyone on the same page.
I mean, usually it works from a vocal track to an instrumental, and the instrumental sometimes it's like a chance to develop something new out of it, and this is mainly how we worked, and we worked it out on the rhythm and sound, basic channel, and Maurizio record as well. But I have some examples for that also later, and this is mainly what I can say to it. I mean, version and dub and all this kind of thing it's something that I feel a bit bad categorizing or like trying to describe it too much. Of course, there are so many examples of how people are doing it, but I think, for example, here you hear breakdown and then everything comes in back again, and playing around with effects, but leaving also some space, some room for the, let's say, 6 or 8 elements that are working together and just working together really well. So I think it's a matter of how the original track is put together. If the original track is put together very well, you can come out with only that small number of elements to play with it. If you have a doubt about the original elements, then it's going to be a bit difficult.
A key element in there might be to listen rather than talk, and I guess you had it when you were not overwhelmed with the stuff and you just had the time to actually concentrate on a new piece of music rather than flicking through 10,000s of titles in one iPod or whatever. When you approach a track, what is your listening approach? I mean, like your partner Mark, for example, almost seems to refuse to lift the needle up before a track is finished in the first place, which is pretty much the opposite of the duck 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 record shop kind of thing.
I like that as well. It's nice to play something out. I like to get into the groove. It's much better. It's more interesting, I think. It's also that you can find out more about what a track that is well done, is saying. I think it's the best way to get into music. I like long pieces. I like the repetitive patterns, of course, but I like also to see how people are treating, as I said, the few elements that are there, and how I am able to treat it in a mix and in the production. So I can also say, if you're setting up a track, give it some time and listen to it over and over. I think that's the best you can do. And if you get tired of it, change it. If it's kind of keeping you smiling and alive, then you should continue. And this is what we've been doing for a long time.
So there's another side to that particular record as well. Yeah. And when you say when you listened to it and learned about it, what were you listening for when you retreated that one?
Maybe I can handle this question to the people, what they recognize of the original track when we listen to it. Thank you. So this track was completely done live in the mix, I remember. It's also a long time ago, but you know, you don't really forget these moments when you do a track like this or a mix or working. It's not a short process. It's something more like weeks than days, I must say, and to decide really what to take or what works and what is possible to do new and to keep the affection for the old record, somehow also to try to get the, you know, the the feeling of the old track somehow transported in that record into the new track. This is for me very important. It doesn't really remain that not so many elements remain or stay. I think the bass is somehow modified and simplified into this new track, and the vibes of the guitar sounding synth chords or patterns which appear in the new track as well. But of course, rhythm and speed and whatever is changed.
When you say you work on this, or it's a process that takes a couple of weeks almost, do you work constantly on it, or do you go back and forth on it, or like, how can we picture the actual process of working on it? I mean, there's other people involved as well, and do you... It's not bad. So there's other people involved as well. Do you take like sketches, or do you make notes, or do you draw it out? How do you?
It's mainly constantly running, and then if there's a little change to do, we try it out, and if there's after a while something bothering or something to be changed or to try out, then it's done. So it doesn't really have to be quickly done. As I said, it's a matter of state of mind and music together. Even if if I'm not in the studio, or if it's not really constantly coming to work on the track, it's in the back of my mind always.
And so how do we have to picture this? There's a board where all the elements are laid out individually on the tracks, and
yeah.
So, and what do you got it feeding the actual board? What's connected to it?
I mean, you mean from?
I mean, not specifically like, oh yeah, there's a little, but more like, can you probably elaborate a little bit on the actual working process?
It's a thing that works mainly from the computer nowadays, of course, but always there's the possibility to change everything around. And so nothing is like fixed too much. Of course, it changes around with equipment, which I like to change also all the time. So it's not something which is kept for many years, except some, I would say, special, like custom-made stuff, which I have. But I try to get into new stuff and also discover old stuff from around the corner shops and stuff like this,
Are you more interested in the pre-board kind of things, as in sound generating devices, or more into effects and?
concerns everything. I mean, when there's a new piece, you gotta try it out. Not because it's new, but if it sounds promising, you know, or people are telling you about it, or whatever reason, I think it's necessary to check it out. All the productions that we did and that I like to do are always kind of connected to a technical change as well. It's nice to combine it, you know.
There's been people, especially on the studio team, that have been joking around when we got into these premises with all these empty, vast buildings around and the different layers of it, that we could use at least one or two of them as echo chambers there. Can you probably elaborate a little bit on what an echo chamber actually is? Because most of us would know it from like plug-in, duck, yeah, whatever. Sounds kind of what I wanted to do. But I have the feeling that you might know a little bit about the development of the history of echoes and delays and stuff.
I think I don't know so much about it. Many people know more about it.
There's always a bigger fish, as we learned.
I think, you know, I just have one thing I remember that when I went to the Motown Museum in Detroit, they just told the story that it wasn't an echo chamber, but it was like a natural hall room that the guys put up under the roof. You know, the studio was in the basement. They put a cable up to the roof and just amped and mic'd it. That was their hall, their natural hall that they used first on the early Motown recordings. This is something what happened, I think, you know, tape echoes and these kind of things everybody knows, I hope. Our old analog, you know, like tape echoes which are still available, or even as some digital copies, and I think it's really great to use them. You don't get tired of the sound. I'm anyway very much up for analog stuff because it's so rich. I also like the digital level and the digital sources that are producing sounds and music, but I think the analog level is just more direct still and more living.
Can we get a mic over there?
Hi.
Hi. You said this track was made like in the 80s. This remix, yeah.
The original was like
and you
70 something, and
you remixed it in the 80s.
No, 90. I have to look.
90 something.
Something, yeah. Late
But still,
90s.
you had it on tape. You had the original tape. So
we had the original tapes, but only the 2-track, not the original multi-tracks. If they are even exist, I mean.
anyway, I was thinking of you said. So how did you actually do the remix? You used a sampler or something like that?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, so you sampled some of the stuff?
No,
or
we didn't sample anything.
not from the original track?
No.
You made a new track like
We made a new track. I think this is also what I like about remixes, if they are done as a new track. I like that idea. To still relate to the original, but to do a new track out of it.
Yeah, because for me at least, when you talk remix,
Yes.
I think of getting like the tracks and just making it different on itself, you know.
Sure.
So I was thinking, and I was kind of thinking if you did it like in mid-80s or something, like how would you have done that?
Yeah. Well, I mean, the approach of doing a remix is very different from person to person, and so is, I mean, the way of working on a remix. Of course, there's the idea of getting just the original tracks, newly organized and newly arranged, from doing completely new work, which doesn't have anything to do on first sight with the original. So there's a very wide range, and I think this mix, for example, is a bit in between the both. Well, it's completely new in a way, but we are still trying to, somehow relate to the vibe of the original, but giving it, another direction, of course, where it's also played, because this is like a disco track in a way.
Yeah, and it's totally different to get the two track than like the separate tracks.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Hi.
Hi.
I only knew about you when I heard one of the remixes you made of one of Tony Allen's track. I think it's called Ole.
Yes.
I was wondering, I took note of the track, I listened to it, and it had a lot of mild pads, synths. It had a lot of soul, but then I listened to the original. It had a lot of the funky kind of bass, the reggae sort of feel. Also, when you did the remix, you actually took the separates, because your mix has got the drumming and all that stuff, and then you get your type of dub style on top of that, and it was very nice. I was wondering, how did you do that? Did you get the separates for the original tracks, or did you take another percussionist or something and added effects on top of that?
I can play the mix. I have it here. I have it with me. We can listen to it, but I don't have the original. In this case, the Tony Allen record, the original, was delivered in multi-tracks or in separate tracks, so I could use the voice on its own, which I did.
I listened.
And I didn't want to use the original drums somehow, because I thought they were so great in the original. I tried something different, Also, the original also I mixed. Do you know that?
I've listened to the original.
I mixed the original record, and I thought, okay, I'm very close to what I did on the mix. I'm very close to the record. I really have to get away a little bit from it and to do it differently, to do, another kind of vibe. And I just can play it quickly, but this is how it was done,
play us your mix of...
I can play it, yeah. Thank you very much.
Well, one question that's pretty crucial to everyone in this room who hopes to one day live of making music is how do you sound like you and not like the 3 million people that try to sound like you?
This is not so easy to answer.
What's the meaning of life? Why are we here? Is there a God?
Exactly. Yeah. Well, to really give an advice is to, if possible, to take time, as I already said, and to be aware of what you're doing, to be spontaneous, but also to keep in mind that there's a kind of, let's say, quiet moment in your doing that you really want to keep, and it's that everything is cool, that everything is fine, that you don't really rush when it's not necessary, and to take it serious what you're doing, and not to waste anything in a way. I mean, of course, sometimes you are better than one day you are better and one day you're not so good. So this is always possible. And to get over this period when you're not so good, you just have to have this, I think, kind of easygoing, or also not too fast moving. I think that's nice. You know, I don't know if this is somehow really understandable, but I think it's very important.
But this time is the ultimate luxury. I mean, a lot of people are or feel rushed into releasing something earlier or faster because, well, they got rents to pay and babies to feed and all that stuff. Like, I guess for you guys, it was always very important to have like a certain economic independence to a degree. No.
It's, of course, it's you know, really something that is not so easy to approach. And you're right, you're easily getting into the fast groove and to do things faster than, you know, sometimes, of course, not always, but sometimes that you still could get better if you would have one more day or so. But for us, it was important to keep it all in our hands, what we had. That was something that economically also worked out. That means that you don't sell really to, you don't sell your product to a big company. You don't look for this kind of thing. You just try to keep it low profile and try to get things going on your own and not be dependent on other people, because this is somehow more time consuming, I found, than to be together with somebody who is telling you what to do, you know, and then you get into mind struggles and this kind of thing, you know, and this is really good time consuming.
But just to be clear on this, when you say not dealing with other people, you're not the lone fighter. You work within a group of people.
It developed like this, but it was not the case. I mean, you know, I started a small studio, and then, you know, people came and we produced some stuff, whatever it was, and a little bit of money came in, and it was a slow build-up, and suddenly, you know, you have a nice record, and it's, you know, then you have another one, but this is a result, from my point of view, of a kind of, you know, disciplined way of keeping it to yourself. I can also understand the other way, if somebody's getting a big advance and you know, tries to live from it for a long time, but I think it's not so healthy.
Is that model still a reality? Because, I mean, big advances are somehow a bit of the 20th century, rather.
No, that's still existing. Yeah, it's still existing. I know it, but I don't. Okay. I just don't like it.
You mean when you do classical recordings and stuff, then you get a decent advance? Or
yeah, for example.
But that's, well, we get to that later. But at the same time, it's. I mean, when you say it would be great to have that other day or that extra day, but you need to come to this point where you make the decision and let something go, and go like, okay,
sure,
this is ready. But isn't the beauty of that reggae and dub told us that a track is just never ready? There's always another version to.
Well, what I discovered in doing this kind of reggae the reggae stuff, and but also the other tracks, whatever it was, you feel when it's done. It can be done very quickly. If it needs another, as I said, another time, another recording, or another 10 minutes or whatever it is, then just take it, you know. But I like to finish stuff also really quickly. If it's done, it's done. If there are mistakes, there are mistakes. But if the vibe is right, or if the feeling is right, then let's go for it, you know. Just ignore whatever little mistakes are, or you know, I mean, there's so many possibilities to get rid of this nowadays. If you want to get rid of it, I like it. I really like the kind of noise and what goes wrong, you know. It doesn't matter if it's not terrible. I mean, of course, you know.
Now, being not perfect or have to let it go in a decent amount of time, that's obviously parameters that can go from 30 minutes to like how long? What's the average time that you take on the track?
I mean, for the production, it takes a long time. It's not really quick. And some stuff goes in about a week, some takes longer, you know. And I think a good possibility to capture different versions of one track is to make versions and to make dubs and to go into the instrumentals to develop a track from another track. So you get something going, whatever it is, if it's with vocals or without, and you develop it and you do mixes and you change the mixes and get into different levels of what you have done first, and you change it over, and another track or another thing will come out of it, you know. And I think this is very, very nice to do, just not to hang on one thing when you have set up something, really to, I mean, even to get another instrumentalist or another vocalist into the studio and do another version of it. I mean, this is obvious and it's quite common, but it's nice.
Apart from the fact that you have to deal with that tiny little thing that they call ego, and obviously you created something, and therefore it must be the greatest thing that you ever did because you did it yourself. But at the same time, there's all these doubts at the same time, and you're like, mind struggles, and so you got all these things struggling within yourself, and then you got other people that have the same thing going on. When you work with someone in the studio, like what's your process of, let's say when you work with Mark, for example, like how does working with Mark differ from working with someone like Tiki Man?
It's really dependent on what the result is. So, you know, to work with anybody, it's always important that at the end of the day, there's something that you can capture, or you know, that you take with you, even if it's not recorded, but you take with you, and it's a step forward. You know, and this is something you have in your hands. You can watch, you can just let go, you can experiment, you can record, you can just sit down and listen for hours or whatever it is. I think the main thing is that you have a result. And even if it's, as I said, if it's not recorded, I mean, just that you have some new development. This is the most important, whoever it is. And if there's no development, I mean, you should not cancel to work with the guy if you have a good feeling. But I think it's nice to look forward to the next day or the next session, to continue and maybe finish the track, you know.
So always, like, no matter how small the step is, always take it a little step forward as well. And nevertheless, you're dealing with human beings, and there's always these situations in the studio when you're like, oh, he might be onto something here, or like, do I encourage him, or do I shut up and sit back? And what did you, I mean, you've worked in like bands with a lot of people, like in your very early days with the Palais Schaumburg, and you worked on your own, you worked like in all different sort of settings, from orchestra to like bedroom. How do you manage that? In the end, the like knowing when to interact with the other person.
I don't. They're just. I say always no, and this is wrong, you know. So nothing really will come out. No, I say the best thing is for me to really most of the time to let go. Not always, but most of the time I just don't interfere until the person is ready, or until something is necessary to talk about, you know. This also concerns vocal sessions. If there are tracks running, you know, you just let the person sing on it and try something out and give it some peaceful time, especially with this kind of music, where, you know, you have the repetition always, and you can't really build a song on top of it. You can, but you don't really need to. You know, if there are fragments or if there's some nice vocal line, and I can, especially with this kind of thing, I can always say, try to record from the very first moment, and if you see or if you hear that there's nothing really happening anymore, you know, of course, stop it, and then you listen to it with the singer, but try to record from the very first moment, because this is something where the best results are coming from.
Speaking of first moments, maybe we should take a little step back into time, and can we hear some Maurizio?
Yeah, we can. I will play, if you agree, I will play a record which is actually also a remix or a rework of a track which was done really quite very undergroundy. Somebody, like a new wave female couple, recorded the original vocals on this, and one of these girls or women asked us to do something with it, with the original vocals, and we did it, and this is what came out of it. The B-side, or the other side, is a mix from Carl Craig. I want to play you just a short moment out of it. It was mainly, as I remember, probably the first mix that he did for us, and we, on our side, we did it also a record for him, which I can play afterwards just shortly. This is all done in, I mean, really quite a long time ago, 1993.
And you put the M on there so everyone knew that it's not Dr. Mabuse, but Minimal?
No comment. Okay, this is his mix, and just when this came in, we also offered him a record which he released on Planet E, and we set up like a project for this this project was called Quadrant, and this is the track that he released on Planet E at that time. Thank you.
Well, you were just saying how much you can hear the actual time and the situations that these records were played in mostly, which gave me a bit of a flashback last week when we tried to have a party in the room next door, and it definitely sounded like some warehouse party, some, God knows, almost 20 years ago, with like the harsh concrete and steel and the reflections and everything. It just sounds a lot harsher than you might imagine it.
Well, it is, for me, of course, a good memory, but I also have impression nowadays when, I don't know, reggae or even, of course, also dubstep parties are going on, that this is, you know, really the right room or the right environment to play these records. I think it's nice to listen to it on the headphones, iPod, whatever, but you know, to play it out in just the right room, this is completely a different story and completely a different attraction, actually, for everybody. So I can encourage everybody also to try it out. I mean,
but at the same time, 2/3 of the time, it is not the ideal conditions that your tracks are played in when you hear them.
I think this is the ideal condition in a way, you know, to have it not on a really the best and whatever sound system. It just has to carry the sound, and the room is very important. The people, of course, who are enjoying it or whatever, and the feel of this particular evening or time. And I think it's not so easy to set up a good club. And I think, you know, because everybody tries to come up with the best sound system or the best whatever bar, and everything is really very upfront, you know, like comfortable and whatever. But I think it's not so important. I would rather see just like a room with a great sound system or a reasonable sound system in it, and just have a good party. You know, that's almost what it takes.
Now, are there any places, or which places do you like to play most at, or to hear your music most at?
It's more or less what I just described. Clubs.
Which sound systems do you find the good ones then?
I think we talked about it yesterday also. It's the combination of room and sound system is very important, and the room has to be prepared maybe a little bit, but not too much. The sound system, I mean, I saw Function One sound systems which are sounding great, and I saw some, you know, and they are nice, definitely, which sounded shit, you know. And it depends on how much care and how much, you know, whatever understanding and listening you put into it. It always depends on the people who are doing it. And I have so many examples for small clubs which are just right because the people are into it and not giving up. If there's something wrong, they change it. So, especially also with turntables, I mean, these are good turntables, but you can also have a go on different things, you know.
I was wondering, like, in a studio environment, do you consider the fact that you're making music for a dance floor? Because like obviously this Maurizio sound and the basic channel sound has been like really, really influential when it comes to what's been heard on a lot of dance floors and a lot of clubs over the last few years. But still, for me personally, it's been like you've always really been making dub, not techno. It's just been your own kind of dub. And
right.
Dub isn't necessarily dance music. Yeah, but I mean, yes, but I mean techno. Well, dub is slow, right? And there aren't many dub clubs all around the world. Not if you compare to like the amount of techno clubs. So techno is more of like very functional sort of dance music. At least for me, of course, I can dance to dub, and you know,
sure,
it's dance music too. But so, well, do you make music for clubs? Basically, that's the question. Or do you consider this when you're making music?
Well, let's try to view it a bit differently. You know, especially for the different, if you want to categorize it, I'm okay, you know, in a way. For me, these Maurizio and Basic Channel records had a lot to do with the later development, because we were using stuff also at that time that we used later, especially the way we already started to use effects and integrate it into the music, to use patterns which are not really defined, but they work with each other and constantly changing. So it's a state of where the music is kind of, you know, not moving. It's a way of it's like a just kept like a Polaroid in a way, you know, where you just have something going on for rhythmically, but it actually stands still also at the same time, and this is for me also the development. I mean, or let's say in dub, you know, it's not really that different. So I don't really break it up between the of course it's different music, the straight bass drum and whatever. You can just see it if you want, as you did, you know. But I don't see it that drastically in a way. The dub records that we did had more space. They were not as played in the clubs as the other stuff first, but now I think it's not such a thing, you know. I mean, for like a change or whatever, you know, you can just play it together, and people are doing it. And when we decided to you know, to have even more space or more room in the records, I can play you some of that changeover, let's say. I was a bit tired of the density that the records had that we had done, you know. So that was the reason. I didn't think about playing out in a club or not. Not so much, actually. Yeah.
Hello. Before I heard your real name, Moritz, I always thought you were from Detroit. So like Basic Channel and stuff like that. Would you agree that the tracks you just played really have a Detroit sound and feeling about them, or wouldn't you?
I don't think so.
So there's no connection with Detroit whatsoever.
No, of course there are many connection. We had visited Detroit. We had made friends there, you know, exchanging mixes as I played. I liked a lot of the stuff that came from Detroit. As I said, collaboration was not a problem. People came to Berlin to record something at my place, and we went to go to cut the records in Detroit. We, you know, all the Basic Channel on Maurizio first records were done or were cut in Detroit and manufactured in the States, only available on import. So this was something that you maybe can consider as being from Detroit, but the sound, I think it doesn't really go together with the Detroit sound in a way. You can I don't know. I don't think so.
And obviously you went to great lengths to go and cut at the same places that had like a certain thickness in a sound that in like the records that you were selling in the shop that you liked, and which really played into your hands as far as myth concerned, and myth created interest, and at the same time you were holding back, and I mean you weren't at least at that time on the cover of any magazines and stuff, and what were the three most ridiculous things you ever heard about yourself? Like who you really are? Did you ever buy a house in Detroit?
We did, yeah. I mean, Mark did. But the most ridiculous things, I think I kept forgetting, I saw some stupid pictures and funny, makeups and whatever. It was fun for us as well to see what is happening when you're actually not doing anything. I mean, this is basically what we did. We just refused to do interviews because we didn't like it. I mean, we just didn't want to. And what came out of it was, as you say, a myth or something like a rumor or many kind of whatever stories. But we laughed about it mainly.
So are you trying to, to say you were not reading Foucault's writings before you were doing a record? I mean, there wasn't a single article in the last 20 years, I guess, about you guys without ever quoting. I mean, you totally had to have Foucault or Derrida in there, sometimes even going back into the antique to Ovid and whatnot, and like just throwing a lot of stuff onto it. And in the end, like, how do you keep the music strong enough to hold against it?
It's also, it just is not so interesting for me, what is written wherever, and I didn't follow it. I didn't want to, get into it. It is really the main reason, and
which is a pretty interesting point, especially now that people seem to not be able to exist without having 3.5 million Facebook friends, and
yeah. Well, it's okay.
But on the other hand, I mean, do you think that the same tactics would still work now?
Yeah, I'm a bit unhappy about the word tactic, because it really wasn't done on purpose. That what came out of it was, for us, it was, as I said, funny. It was, kind of out of our hands, of course. We didn't want to know about it. We didn't like when people were taking, let's say, fame out of it, when people were hanging on to it as being in the same circle or whatever. We didn't like that. This was something that sometimes happened, but most of the time...
So were they expatriated and executed after that? Did they have to go and produce software afterwards?
No, not really. No. But we kicked ass on that, yeah.
Right.
No, I mean, as I said, what happened was, because also of a little bit bad experience that I had before working together with Mark, or working on that level of intensity, on concentration, on music and studio, and also like a certain circle of people, what came out of it was out of our hands. I can just say it again. And we didn't get into it until we worked with other artists directly, mainly vocalists, which we felt the responsibility to work for the product. Also, we had to take responsibility for their work as well. And that's when we decided to answer some questions, but not only on a certain level. And I think that's fair enough. I mean, you know, it's, sorry, but it can be a pain in the ass, you know, questions and journalists and all this kind of thing.
It's like, I mean, there's nothing worse than a room full of journalists. Like, every journalist in here might know it when you get to those promo days, like, and all of them are waiting there, like, let's not even go there. But I mean, and I guess there's a lot of people in here too that want to produce their music, but they can't. And I mean, yes, in the end, we do live in a capitalist marketplace, and you somehow have to sell some sort of product. And you as a human being might be part of that product if you want it or not. But I can, off the top of my head, name you at least 100 people that I wouldn't like to talk to in German press if I was in that position. And
I mean,
it's a horrible. It's like, hey, let me just do my music, kind of thing.
Yeah, and also, I mean, again, this is a self-determined way. At that time, I made another experience just now with another release that I did with Carl Craig again, where we actually really had 2 days of promo working, but still, you can put an answer down or question down. You know, you just say, skip that, next one, and I hope it doesn't seem, you know, unfriendly, because this is not what I want, and I don't want to be, you know, against the whole, let's say, setup of promo. It works in a way, but for this kind of thing that we did at that time, and also for coming back to your question, for products nowadays, I think they can just live without going public.
So, so in that case, let's say, is that Deutsche Grammophon saying like, okay guys, we did all this, and it might look a lot bigger than it is, but we can't work it in the way that you're used to. You just have to deal with talking to highbrow cultural people. And
yeah, the people who came to this promo activity, they were more or less the same that interviewed me for Basic Channel, or like Rhythm and Sound, before. So it was not such a big change, you know. They are interested in what we are doing, and they are really music friends, and people who want to know what's going on, how it came together, just a little bit like here, you know, how the production was going on, how things were set up in the studio, how the sessions came together and everything, and it was fine to you know, help them in their field, you know. This was okay.
Now, from mastering a record in a den basement in Detroit to using Karajan's tapes and you're going to perform this week, right? As well in Paris. I mean, you couldn't be much further diametrically opposite as this. How did you have to change your mindset for working, or?
I didn't have to change it. It's something that is always, for me, connected to the depth of the stuff that you're doing. If you're going to cut it or treat it or record it wherever it is, you know, it's great that it happens. It's great that there's something valuable coming out of it. The sessions for this album with Carl were done here and there, so in Detroit and Berlin, and under various circumstances, and we tried to forget where it comes from, you know, like from high-profile musician, conductor, studio recording, whatever it was, and just, you know, try to create something out of it, what we can live with, and what really is combined to what we have done. So it's not such a big change for me. Maybe from outside, it seems to be a big turnaround, but I can just personally say it's not.
I guess it's a special Western thing, or at least a European thing, that orchestras are associated with high culture, and that's when you're officially grown up, and a large part of the curriculum or of the program that's played is by people who have to be dead for at least 100 years, and you're entering a totally different context than, let's say, being played in a club that's mainly featuring music that's done by 16-year-old kids on their PlayStation. And how do you? I mean, people tend to forget that people like Beethoven or Mahler were slightly radical in their ways too. But how do you work in that environment without being dragged down by it and, almost killing your past work? As in, like, okay, grown up, finished, book closed. I'm a real artist now.
Well, as I said, I don't see it really that way. It's mainly my love for the stuff that I experienced, for the love of the studio work and music in general, and it's very important that you have to be aware of the process of how you get to it and where you stand when you work with it. And the stuff which I really like about classical music is when it's played live, and to have this big sound. I'm connected to the variety of dynamics, instruments, frequencies, sometimes really great moments where everything is lifting up and the whole place is shaking, as well as in a club, and it can be, for me, it can be the same intensity, and that's what I'm looking for. So I can recommend to join classical concerts.
I mean, yeah, it does help too that those rooms are built to sound good in the first place.
Of course.
Right?
And I don't see orchestra music or whatever, ensemble music, classical music, as something that is related only to the old generation. I can see it, being played, and it is also working to be played in different environments, to be played in clubs, as we did also last week. The big club in Berlin, Berghain, they are going to establish another room where they are getting ballets and operas and whatever to be performed, and I think that's a very nice idea. I mean, of course, you have to have the taste, or you have to like it. But I do.
Yeah, but even if you don't like it, if you go and see a Mahler piece in a symphony hall and you got 8 upright basses, that's a lot of bass right there as a start, and it's just a pure physical sensation can get you.
I agree. I agree.
Now, probably it's a little easier for you because, like quite a few of our participants in here, you do have a classical background as well.
Yes.
But this could probably be the lead to what you called your favorite record. It's once you deal with echoes and delays and stuff, certain sound sensations or sonic sensations occur that are not necessarily played in that classical understanding of using keys and stuff. Nevertheless, you end up with frequencies, with harmonies and all of that, and you have to somehow manage and arrange those sounds in the end. Could we probably take that as an example of how you do that?
Yeah. let's listen first, and then I explain, because I quite remember also, I mean, this record is also quite old, but I remember well how it was done and what also this special moment, because it's really not, it was not possible to recall it at all, you know. Thanks. There was somebody who had a question before.
Let's see. Yeah, well, it was really just like connecting with the whole thing you were talking about, being mysterious towards the press and sort of secretive and kind.
Okay.
But maybe this is just one of those pesky journalistic questions. I don't know. There was this white label floating around a while ago called Wax 1001 or something. And it was just rumored to be a basic channel production, and it sounded a lot like you, a bit cleaner perhaps than the old stuff. But, well, was it?
No.
Okay. Do you know who made it? Because it was from the Hard Wax
Yeah,
circle.
I have no idea, honestly.
Seriously?
Yeah.
Okay, but you've heard it?
I didn't hear it.
No? Okay,
No.
well,
I didn't hear it.
it's a great 12-inch, and it does sound a lot like the old basic channel stuff. A lot of stuff sounds like that, of course, but it comes really close. Only a bit cleaner, somehow, more modern, if you will. All right, but you're not aware of the rumors that it's a basic channel production, because there's a lot of rumors about that. You're not aware of it. Okay, thank you.
Is that like being in the Rolling Stones and everywhere where you come you find a cover band that's doing Jumping Jack Flash?
It's again something that was not possible to follow. I mean, it sounds a bit big-headed in a way, but through the mastering studios, through dubplates and mastering, you know, we had heard so many copies or, you know, related tracks, and it was sometimes necessary to follow it because it was a rip-off or a sample that was used. And again, this is something that we really didn't appreciate, but when people are trying to just copy the sound or something similar to do, you know, we gave up. We gave up to listen to everything that people wanted to play. The engineers, I mean, they just came up sometimes almost every day, and
We found another one.
exactly. So, yeah.
Hi. Your music is quite hypnotic, almost. And for me, it's like you kind of get lost in the beats, and or the beats kind of fade away, and you get lost in all the layers on top. It kind of lures you into that state, and you talk about it's like almost music. It's standing still.
Yeah.
It's like a picture. Do you find that? Because I find it really hard to get records like Domina and Quadrant and stuff like this nowadays. And even yourself, you talk that you got quite tired of the density of the records. Do you think it's a dying art almost, this type of hypnotic techno music? A dying art, like people aren't producing it anymore.
I don't think so. I think if you find the right way to do it, then just do it, you know. If you find the right angle, how the elements are working together, it's worth to go for it. And I would rather do this than to come up with like elements, or, you know, like I like these horizontal view more than the vertical thing, you know, where events are happening and you're looking forward to the next event in music. I think the other one is more what I like, and maybe you too.
So, could you recommend any new artists who are doing this kind of like still picture music without just blatantly like ripping off your sound? So, do you know anyone who's like, apart from you guys, who are like taking it further, perhaps, today?
I must say, not so much, you know.
All right.
But there are some definitely. I mean, I don't have a chance to follow club music so much in the moment because there's just different stuff. But I think, you know, there's some. Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, especially with the development of getting back to reggae, to slow rhythms, also into, I would say, really dubstep is some possibility, you know. It's a very nice and great feel that it generally has. It's a bit different, but it's very, very nice.
Probably on that same notion from earlier, this is your chance to get canalize this problem of copycats a little bit. Like, what do you recommend as a self-check before putting a record out that sounds maybe a lot like the record you really love? Because, I mean, you went through the same stage as in taking something like the digital reggae things that you really loved and put your own twist to it. Like, when do you know it's far enough from the original and a lot more of your own that it's worth to present it to the world rather than just being a knockoff?
I think being honest to yourself is very important. And I mean, I really like reggae from early days, 80s, 90s, and also some stuff from nowadays, but that doesn't mean that I want to kind of get close to it from the sound, you know? I mean, I can play just now some stuff that I really like, but it doesn't have to do with what I'm producing, you know? So when you like something, you don't really have to copy it, don't you? I mean,
not necessarily, no. You don't have to. I mean, that's one of the greatest things of that kind of music, that you didn't have like in classic guitar pop or whatever, where your influences on a sleeve, but you could rather rework them. And
yeah, I mean, what we did, of course, was like, you know, to try to work with vocals and vocals that were also already present, like this. I mean, this record here, it's called King in My Empire, and I mean, Colonel Campbell is, you know, a veteran, but his voice is so unique that it's just great to work with it. And this is something that also, of course, you know, was necessary to keep in mind when we kept on dealing with Lloyd Barnes, Wackies, that it's just a great singer. He's a great artist. He's a great person, and it's just a level of communication and collaboration that you do that is very unique. And working with great singers is something that is wonderful. I just play some little stuff of this.
yeah, probably as a reference for those of you who might have missed it, tonight we're gonna hear him, Tiki Man. I mean, we're running on a really hectic schedule today. It may not seem like it now, but it would be a shame to let you go without probably telling us just a little bit about how, especially in tracks like these, and when you're dealing with especially echoes and delays, it's so easy to overcloud the track. And how do you know, open up the white spaces and keep them in the box at the same time? Can you give us...
Live mixing. Before that, I mean, we talked about it, just really checking what is necessary, what is not necessary. And keep in mind that there's somebody listening, and you're not the only one. So listening in a way through other people's ear, and or imagine people to, just dive into the track and get deep into it. And this is something that happens when, from my point of view, when also random or not really things, I mean, it's very, there's no recipe to it, but for me, it keeps on hitting that level of energy, also this subtle energy, which is very hard to get when you have a distance at the same time as you have the access to it. This is as good as I can describe it, and be aware and also being somehow not aware of everything that can happen in the mix, and it's something really hard to describe, I must say.
Sounds a bit like life, like you have to be aware and not aware of the things all the time and just oscillate. Yeah. On a less subtle note, we won't let you go without hearing at least another closing favorite of yours. But please, after that, have your dinner really quickly, because we need to start on point at 4:15 again. So just keep that in mind before everyone rushes off, and because we all want to see the show tonight, I guess, at least some of us. And since it's outside and so on, we have to do it start on point and so on. So please bear that in mind, be back at the 4:15. But what is this record that we're going to hear?
Well, it's also very deep and dark track from a later King Tubby's production on his famous label Firehouse. But it's a nice track. Maybe you don't know it.
This has probably have given you some sort of insight why Mr. von Oswald is one of the architects that slightly changed how we listen to music in the past few years. And this is our chance to thank him for sharing with us. So please give it a hand.
Thanks again. Appreciate your attention. Thank you.